Arden Hart is a trans rights activist and reptile enthusiast, first and foremost. We definitely support that here. She grew up in a staunchly conservative town, and her family was involved in a non denominational charismatic church for much of her early life. Despite that upbringing, or perhaps because of it, she became aware of her trans identity from an early age. That was one of the most consequential forces that knocked over the first domino in her deconversion and laid the path to where she is today. A brazen atheist, skeptic, humanist, and defender of trans rights, and recently the deliverer of what I think was the best talk at the American Atheist Convention. So if you missed out on that, now is your chance to continue the conversation and hear more from Arden about that. So, Arden, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us. We are
I was muted.
super
There we go.
excited.
Hi. Hey,
Yes.
thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for coming. I was so excited that you agreed to come on the program after you gave such an amazing talk. And I know a lot of people were not able to go to the convention, but would still love to hear from you. So this worked out perfectly timing wise. So cannot wait to continue that conversation with you.
Yeah, I'm ready. Let's get into it.
Excellent. Okay. Well, so we talked a little bit about it in your bio, but for people that don't know you or your background, which, is, likely most people on the internet or randomly joining us who do not know
Sure.
you personally, um, could you tell us a little bit about kind of your background from a religious perspective and how that sort of came together to where we are today? Tell us your story.
Yeah. So, like you said, I grew up in this like sort of non-denominational charismatic church. We called ourselves the Church of Christ, but I think formally the Church of Christ practices a little bit differently than we did. So I think it was just kind of a coincidence that they went with that name. But yeah, I mean, my parents, it was interesting because my parents were never really adherents. They never really practiced well. They were not good Christians, I would say. They did not listen to the words being spoken to them on Sunday, but they liked how they felt when they went. So, we went and I went to a private Christian school and it was very biblically literalist, and they took things very seriously. So, and at the private Christian school, we were having Bible class every day. So I was getting my full atheist indoctrination, being forced to read the Bible. And I think it was somewhere around like 10 or 11, kind of, where a lot of kids might stop believing in other sort of fanciful things. I just personally, I don't even really remember sincerely believing in God. I do remember sincerely praying a lot, like asking God to like make me wake up as a girl or something like that. But I don't really remember sincerely believing, to be honest. So I think it just kind of faded away pretty early on. And then I got into some woo in my early teen years, but by like 18 or so, I think I was probably an atheist. I wouldn't call myself an atheist for a few more years until I kind of started to see those conversations happening online and being like, oh, that's the label for what I am. And then I took some philosophy courses in college as well and started to kind of refine what I think about these topics and like, my worldview and things like that. So yeah, that's kind of where I come at from a religious perspective.
So it was just as they warned. You went to college, you took a philosophy class, and became an atheist, just like in that one movie.
Listen, I'm not going to say they were right, but they were totally right about that one. At least education will do it to you.
Yep.
The Ark Encounter, Ken Ham's Ark Encounter, the last panel, as I understand it, I've never been there, but other people have recorded it, and I've interviewed some of them. The last panel is warning people not to go to college because that's a horrible thing that can happen. You might not believe what we just told you for the last 2 hours about that's nonsense.
Yeah, no, I mean, I luckily, like, I'm definitely grateful at least that my parents weren't super strict because I feel like that gave me kind of permission to, when I kind of just stopped believing, to like actually consider that as like an optional path rather than just thinking like, no, I have to hold to this or whatever. So yeah, there was at least a little bit of flexibility there, but it was also confusing when like, I'm going to school and church and they're telling me like, you got to act this way, you got to dress like this, you got to be like this. And then I go home and my parents do none of those things. And they're all like drinking and gambling and smoking at the like around the table, which was fun. I loved, like, I have a lot of fond memories of like us kind of playing games together around the table and stuff. But um, Yeah, it was confusing from like a moral, ethical perspective of like, what am I supposed to believe or do with all this information, when you guys aren't even practicing it. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. We hear from a lot of people who came from like a very strict fundamentalist background where it was kind of like the opposite. Like you go home and like it's even more strict and, follow every rule. But that would be really confusing as a child. And I don't know that people really think that through when they are kind of like casual followers, but then they put their kids in a church or a school where they're teaching something that's a lot more strict than what they're witnessing at home.
Yeah, I think in my mom's defense, she thought she was giving me like the best education that she could. She
Mm,
wanted to have me have like a private school education, which there was some value in that. Like our like writing programs and our English programs are great at that school, but um I had no idea who like Bill Nye was when I got to public school in eighth grade and realized I was way behind everyone on things like science. So, there were drawbacks to that.
yeah, we had that at my
That
school
that's a
too.
common thing, and that's one of the reasons some of the episodes of RfRx deal in science education and not just strictly the religious trauma issues, because it's so many of our clients have had no schooling in science at all.
Mhm.
Totally. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and so did this sort of timeline of you just kind of, I like how you said it, you just, stopped believing in supernatural things, or I forget how you put it. Um, and that was when your religious faith just kind of started to fade away. Did that coincide at all with your coming out? Or did your parents already know? Or
Yeah. So my story is a little weird, and I don't remember if I told the whole thing last time, but I started to be aware around like 10 or 11 years old that I was like, man, I keep hearing us talk about what gay people and these other degenerates are the problems with them when I'm at school. But man, I definitely don't feel like I am fitting the mold that they want me to. And luckily, like I had encountered like little bits of media that made me like aware of the existence of trans people, and so in the age of the internet I was like, I'm gonna research what this feeling is, and I found answers. And so I do think that that was probably a sort of kind of like we put in the bio, that was a confluence of things. I think as I started to realize like, oh, the Bible's saying people like me are like degenerates and deserving of death and all these sorts of things, but I don't really feel like I am those things. And so there's something wrong there. And then after lots of praying and not feeling like I was hearing anything back, I think it was just kind of like, well, and then on top of that, when I finally did come out to my mom when I was like 14 or so, um, we got kicked out of our church, and I got like I had already left my private Christian school, but like I wasn't allowed to talk to most of those friends anymore. So it was very clear that there was like I was not welcome in the religious space. So I think that also kind of amplified probably part of my like angry atheist phase that I would kind of go through later in my early 20s.
So, what was the path between you telling your mom and you guys getting kicked out of the church? What happened there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it wasn't right away because when I came out there was nobody in my hometown who had heard of trans people or knew what trans people were. My mom wasn't even really sure what to do. Her first instinct was to take me to like a therapist or somebody who might be able to kind of give her some tools about like what to do. And so there was a period of like a year or close to 2 years, I would even say, that I was in therapy. And this was actually required at the time. We used to have what was called the Harry Benjamin standards of care, where you were expected to like be in therapy for a long time and be like living as the gender you identify as for a certain period of time before you could even access care. Um, and so yeah, I think it was around the time where it started to become public knowledge, and it was a really small town, so it didn't take long for it to become public knowledge. But um, yeah, I think eventually they found out that my mom was like enabling me. They would probably view it rather than hardline like telling me no, absolutely not, you can't do that. And so as a result of it, they were like, well, if you're going to be such a terrible, awful mother, then you aren't welcome here anymore. This is like a Church of God kind of thing. And yeah, I mean, I feel bad for her too, my mom, because, even though she wasn't a super practicing person, that was community that she had and people that she was relying on that she lost as a result of us going through that, to protect me. So, um, yeah, it's really unfortunate even for her.
Do you
But
remember how that happened? Did they call her on like in a service to come up to the front, or did the pastor come to the house?
No, I don't think the pastor, well, I'm not entirely sure where the communication took place. I know that it was in part due to my uncle, because my uncle was a big contributor to the church and he was a very devout POS, can't stand the guy. And I think he probably like informed them in some capacity. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly how the conversation went down. I don't think my mom would have ever told me that at that age. I think she probably was like, you don't need to know this information. This is something that's happening that's not your fault, but they're making it about you. So yeah.
Well, I love that your mom did the right thing by you and chose to let those people who were not very supportive friends go because they
Yeah.
sound like jerks.
She's the
Uh,
best. My mom is my number one.
Oh, I love that. And now here you are today, and you are the host of shows on the line. You're giving talks at American Atheist Convention. This is awesome. How well, okay, first let me ask you, what tell us a little bit about your show on the line and what is your favorite part about being an activist now?
Yeah. Oh, my favorite part about the show is probably, I mean, it's nice to have the opportunity to sort of like refine my arguments and my talking points and to kind of test the waters in a low stakes kind of environment where like, we're live so many hours throughout the week. Like there's going to be mistakes and I'm always open to being like corrected or like making the adjustments that I need to. And so I've changed my arguments a lot over the years, I think. And it's been nice to kind of hone in on like what seems to be effective as an activist and maybe what strategies that might come naturally to me or that I might prefer in conversation are actually like not really reaching people writ large. So it's been nice to have that opportunity to sort of refine my approach to talking to people about this issue.
Oops, I was muted. We just like you said, we do this every week, and we still do things like forget to unmute ourselves. But
Oh, totally. All the
yeah,
time.
I love that, and I love that you have that kind of learning and growth attitude towards the process. Like you are a very humble person. I think that's part of what makes for me your show enjoyable is that you are very pleasant to talk to. You don't
Aw,
come across to me as like overbearing or anything, and I think that that is very accessible for a lot of people. So thank you for being an awesome communicator.
thanks. I know some people don't think I am, but I do meet people where they're at. So like if someone's coming at me with, even if they have a polite tone, if they're coming
Yeah.
at me with like actual disrespect, like I will
No.
probably go in like twice as hard on them. So that is probably a flaw. People would say I do get the comment that I am too mean from time to time because generally speaking, I do always try to meet people where they're at. Like, I don't need you to know all the right words or to like gender me correctly if we're kind of like navigating the space of like you genuinely wanting to understand why I think what I think in that kind of position. Like that, I'm totally game for us not being on the same page in that conversation. But as soon as I can tell that you don't really have any intention of having like an honest, open conversation and you are just kind of here to be disrespectful, I don't really have uh any mute or filter at that point. That disappears and I will kind of come down pretty hard on people, but I try to be effective. So I appreciate that it's coming across.
Yes, it is coming across. I think you are effective, and I don't think you have to apologize for shutting down disrespectful people. If they felt like that was mean, I'm sorry. Their feelings got hurt. Don't be disrespectful, and this will stop happening to you. It's
Yeah.
real simple. So yeah, well, okay, speaking of people being disrespectful, it it's great segue. It seems to me that transphobia is kind of having a moment in the secular community lately. A lot of people are coming out just really hot about this topic. What do you
Mhm.
think is the deal with that? I mean, that was kind of the point of you giving the talk that you gave at American Atheist was kind of dealing with this issue. But what do you think is going on there? Why are we having to deal with this right now?
Yeah. I mean, I think this is such a multifaceted issue. It's really hard to pin down the cause for any one individual getting into it the way that, the subjects of my talk have. I think there has been a concerted effort by public officials and government bodies to sort of pervert the public's understanding on these issues, like especially when we're looking at the UK and things like the Cass report, that are like so disingenuous from top to bottom, or like the newly released HHS report from our own US government here that was recommending exploratory therapy, which is just a rebranding of conversion therapy that has the exact same goals, many of the same approaches. Um, and so it's hard to blame people all the time because I do think that there's so much misinformation out there. I mean, I constantly am talking to people who, a big part of my talk was talking about, oh, Richard said this and Sam Harris said this and Point said this. And well, obviously, I can't speak for everyone in the trans community. I am very plugged in. I'm talking to people all the time, almost every single day, lots of activists from all different parts of the world. And I'm not hearing people actually hold these positions. And so there's that one bit where it's like people are starting from a standpoint that thinking they're responding to trans issues when they're not. They're responding to what like the Christian nationalist far right has perpetuated is the trans issue, is what's one problem. And then I think there is like, some, it's hard. Well, I would say that the experience of gender identity and sexuality are very synonymous in like how they feel to the individual. It's just this sort of fact about yourself, and you can't really explain why you like boys or girls, right? You can't explain why you like a certain movie or anything like that. You can't explain why you feel the way you do about your gender, but you do. It's just a fact. You observe yourself and you're like, I know being a boy isn't right for me, And I think for a lot of people, there's also this feeling of because I can't see your gender, because you can't point to your gender for me, that it feels functionally like a faith claim. And I think that's kind of where a lot of the atheist skeptical people get swept in, to this view of sort of transness as some sort of religion or some sort of fad or cult that's kind of building off of like, popularity in the media or something.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's an interesting way to put it, that they sometimes people will kind of compare it to a faith claim, because it's not something that they can kind of tangibly point to. But
Mm.
and we do hear people kind of framing the argument that way sometimes, saying like, well, this is, scientific facts versus your, woke ideology and that kind of thing. Um, what do you think is wrong with that framing of this issue?
Well, I mean, I think again, there's part of the problem is that sort of misrepresentation. They're already starting from, oh, trans activists think that, they'll often say like that men can be women. And the charitable translation that I can put on that is that they think that trans activists are saying there's no distinguishable difference between a trans woman and a cis woman, which I don't know any trans person that thinks that. Like the fact that I am trans is in and of itself a distinction between me and a cisgender woman, right? Like that's the whole point of the adjective, the modifier there is that it's modifying the word woman. Um, so like they're kind of starting from these strange points. And I do also think something that I hear from a lot of these people is they'll take a position that's kind of like the kind of thing you only hear on Twitter. Basically, like I see Twitter accounts saying this, but when I'm actually talking to activists working in real life, nobody holds that position. And so it's like they kind of find one fringe person who says the thing that they want them to say so that they can frame it in a certain way. And they're like, see, trans activists think this. I have evidence this person said it. And it's like, sure, but we could do that for almost every community, right? Find some like, I don't want to use like disparaging language for people in this way, but like, some random person who has some fringe idea and represent it as it's the internet. You can find someone who thinks anything, right? So it's like they're kind of doing some confirmation bias sort of reinforcing. And so just a lot of time gets spent on trying to disprove the facts. It's so easy to tell a lie, but to be a trans activist in many ways, you have to be like an expert on like biology and sociology, and you have to know history broadly and specifically queer history, and you have to know like epidemiology, and like you have to understand policy and all of these different realms to like be a well-rounded activist of like, here's how all of these things intersect. And to say a lie, to spread a lie, you just have to say some shit. And so it ends up being a big chore for, I think, a lot of activists and sort of the skeptic science community to try to sweep things up. And I'm kind of moving a little bit away from the disproving strategy in my current sort of approach, but I do think it's important to show people that there are counter arguments. That was a big part of my talk, was talking about, we're going to go through the counter arguments of the things that they're saying, but also I fundamentally kind of want you to know that, like, you don't even need that information. Like, think about these other impacts, just like socially, like how are they going to enforce like a bathroom bill, like when that's going to be just basically policing the gender of lots of people, primarily cis women. It's going to be women who fail to meet the standards of femininity that are going to get called out. And just because there are more of them at a baseline, there are going to be more of them that are going to be called out and accused in bathrooms and things like this. And so, yeah, I'm trying to reach people on more of like an empathy level. And I really like kind of pulling back to bodily autonomy because, fundamentally, I can never access the contents of your mind and you can never access mine to know that my gender is real and I am a true trans person. All you can see are the way I express myself, the things that I chose to do to transition and things like this. And so I'm kind of moving into a place where it's like my freedoms, like, so what if I'm not a real trans person, but I like the way my hair looks? I like the surgeries that I've gotten to make my body feel more like mine. Like, fundamentally, who really cares what my gender really is? Like, is this not America where I should have the freedom to live my life in the way that I see fit and to express myself in the way that I see fit and to be with consensual partners who are into me and like what I bring to the table and things like that. So I've been kind of trying to go more at that angle for a lot of these conversations because it kind of short circuits and bypasses needing to get into the weeds of like, what is biological sex? Like, do you actually have good evidence for that? Is that actually like a universal law or anything like that? It kind of just scoots around the whole conversation and goes like, even if we sort all that out, it doesn't matter because we come back to this fundamental question about rights and bodily autonomy. And I think that is more of what I'm interested in. Like, I can't force you to think differently about trans people, but I can hopefully convince you that trans people deserve to live the way they want to live, unencumbered by you and what you think and the government.
Yeah, I really appreciate that approach that you took, where you really kind of took the time to go through and refute a lot of these talking points, and then at the same time say, and we don't really need to worry about any of that because don't be a jerk.
Right. That is like honestly a really simple way to boil it down. It's just don't be a jerk is a good way to do it.
Yeah, I wish more people would adhere to that motto, and we would all be a lot happier. And I mean, you make a really great point. Like, I know plenty of cisgender people who have had numerous surgeries, who go to great lengths to make their hair look a particular way and do their makeup a particular way, and they
Yeah.
do all sorts of routines to make their bodies look a particular way. They dress a particular way, and no one is running up and telling them that the style that they have chosen for their hair that day is like not biologically supported. Like,
Right.
that's not relevant.
I'm a huge fan of like trash reality TV. I love reality dating shows. They're so toxic, but I'm obsessed. And part of it that I love is exactly what you're talking about, where it's like, we spend so much time talking about how trans people perform gender, or like another common thing people will say is like, aren't you just playing on stereotypes? When it's like, have you ever watched The Bachelor? They are obsessed with the performance of gender to a very like conservative degree. Like, and they will say this outright too. They'll like, there's one date that they will do on every season where like they get a shopping spree, right? They'll take
Yeah.
the girl out to this fancy place and she'll buy like a bunch of dresses that are like thousands of dollars. And they'll always say something like, "Oh, like I feel so girly in this. Oh, I love how I look in this. Like I love the way he looks at me in this." And I'm like, this is all like, that is gender performance. That is indistinguishable from what a trans person is doing when they are affirming their gender. Yeah, it's frustrating because I think it's really common that trans people get held in a lot of different dimensions of this conversation to a really high standard. Like, we have to perform gender correctly, but not too much, so we're not like reinforcing stereotypes. And we have to all these different kind of levels of standards, of like the quality of evidence for healthcare and things like that, that they don't hold to other people or other uncontroversial treatments that aren't being talked about or taken away in legislation. So yeah, it is a frustrating thing to constantly have to battle that sort of disparate standard.
Yes, can't wait for people to realize that, once they try and outlaw, okay, minors under a certain age can't have any kind of gender affirming surgeries. Okay, well, guess what? That's gonna affect a whole lot more cisgender kids than trans kids by a mile and a half. So get ready to realize that after the fact, too late. Um, but, yeah, you make such a good point. I think people a lot of times, if it's what they're used to seeing, it just flies completely under our awareness, and I know a lot of
Mhm.
people get excited about this term, social construct, but, when something is socially constructed, as and not to say that gender is in its entirety a social construct, it is more complex than that, but to the
Mhm.
extent that we have as a society kind of agreed upon certain things that we recognize as feminine and certain things that we recognize as more masculine, when people see that operating as they expect it to, it's like they don't see it at all. But it's only when someone is doing it in a different way that all of a sudden, oh my God, what is happening? I can't believe it. You can't do that. It's not natural. Yes, in fact, you can do that. We've all been doing that, just in the way you expect it. So,
Totally.
yeah, that's, very frustrating. Okay. So, along those lines, like, what are some other of the kind of talking points, that come up a lot when people call in, for example, to your show on the Transatlantic Call-In Show, on the line? What do you think
Mhm.
are some of the main things that people are coming with either questions about or arguments about that you hear kind of over and over again that you want to address or lay to rest?
Yeah, I mean, so we talk a lot about like biological sex and whether or not it's separate from gender and whether or not it is like truly binary. So that's a conversation that happens a lot. And I go into like great detail in my talk, kind of dismantling the notion of like biological sex as a binary. I think it depends on how you're framing it. Because sometimes when people say binary, it seems as though what they mean is that things happen along a trend, which to me, that's not a true binary because you're saying
No.
things mostly happen along 2 points, but sometimes there are exceptions, right? That's the trans affirmative understanding of biological sex, in my view, is that sure, most people are male or female and cisgender, like very normatively, but there are exceptions to that, right? But to me, when you say something is binary, that is 1 and 0, two outcomes, no exceptions. And that is clearly not the case when it comes to biological sex on almost any dimension that you observe it, from gametes to chromosomes to secondary sex characteristics. It just doesn't happen. And that's the nature of like biology, right? Humans, in order to have like a healthy population that can evolve and adapt to its environments, you have to have diversity in your populations. That's just like makes sense for humans. I think we've kind of talked a little bit about this notion of like gender as a fad or a religion. Um it, and this one is just it's I think probably the most frustrating because we get a lot of skeptics and atheists calling in on this and kind of ties back to what we're saying about this like these disparate standards where they're like if you're going to start saying that someone's gender identity is equivalent to a faith claim, like I think that just kind of leads you to a point of absurdity where I'm like, what at what point do you stop questioning the internal state of somebody else then? If they say they're in pain, if they say they're gay, if they say they're hungry, they say they like this or that, like you don't know that. They could be lying. They could be lying for nefarious purposes. But we don't spend time talking about that. We spend time talking about how trans people are potentially lying. And that to me seems very clearly like you're kind of already starting with this bias against trans people, this assumption about our motives and what we might do with it, which is ironic, like I say in the talk, because your whole stipulation is that you can't evaluate my internal state, but then you're applying some motivation to me that you have no way to demonstrate. So I think it's easier to just accept that we don't have access to other people's brains. And unfortunately, would it be nicer if there was like a way to like see like we have implants in our eyes that confirm your gender? Ah, yes, you are a woman. Oh, magic. I mean, that sounds like a gross eugenics hellscape a little bit. But that point aside, like, sure, maybe in some future we could have some technology that could figure that out, but we don't have that right now. And really all you have is someone's say so. Like, I do genuinely feel this way, and we know that when they feel this way, they're going to benefit from being affirmed by their community and having documents that represent the gender that they are and having access to treatments that affirm their gender. We've tried pretty much every form of treatment outside of that, and none of them work. But affirming someone's gender is. And affirming someone's gender isn't saying you're locked on this pathway. It's just saying, what do you need to do to feel good in your skin as a trans person? Do you need breast augmentation? Cool, let's get that. Do you need hormone therapy? Cool, let's do that. Do you need to like put minoxidil on your face so you grow facial hair? Cool, let's do that. You know, like, it's kind of supposed to be letting the patient guide the like goals and directives, and having like an expert sort of there to facilitate that journey in the way that's healthiest possible and following the evidence to the best of their ability. And there's one more point, and I think this is fundamental in a lot of ways, which is this sort of rejection of all of the academic work on this. And they'll usually, this is something Sam Harris says a lot, you know, that our institutions are captured, which is conveniently so fucking vague. Like, I don't, oh, sorry, I don't know if I should F drum bop on
Oh,
this.
it's fucking
Okay.
fine.
Okay.
Get
I said
after
drum bop too, I think, after, but
it.
it's so fucking silly. Like, I don't know what that means that we've captured these institutions, or what influence trans people can realistically have. I mean, we are like 1% of the population. We have virtually no power institutionally in any place at all in society. So the notion that we could take control of the entirety of academia such that they could lie about science is so strange to me.
Across multiple fields and disciplines throughout the academy too. Biologists, psychologists, anthropologists. Wow, they
Yeah.
got everyone together who has letters after their name and got them all on board with this scheme that we're running.
Yeah,
Wow, incredible.
it's so silly. And it's just like, and again, like, the HHS just released a document that had no supporting evidence other than appealing to the CAS report, which also had no evidence to suggest that gender affirming care is harmful, just that we don't know enough about it is what they keep appealing to. We don't know what could happen, what if, what could, and all these like appeals to the unknown. And so it's frustrating that, like I said, there's been like a real concerted effort to pervert the public understanding on this, and institutions like the UK government and the US government are being used to legitimize these positions that have no evidence behind them. And it's unfortunate because nobody's pretending that like the science behind trans healthcare is at its peak. It can't get any better than this. We've got it all figured out. No, of course not. Like, we're always developing science and we're doing better. But the point of medicine is to look at the situation we have and say, okay, maybe this isn't going to be the best path in 30 years. Maybe we'll realize there's a better path. But right now, this seems to be the best path to giving these people the best quality of life, the lowest risk of, you know, suicidal ideation and all these other sort of comorbidities that come into play. So, yeah, it just seems silly to me that we're going to dismiss the evidence because it's not good enough. And I also mentioned in my talk that, like, this is a problem in medicine broadly. Like, there's so many treatments that have really low quality evidence. And there are some like studies that have evaluated, you know, thousands of treatments at a time and found that like a massive percentage of them are low or very low quality in their evidence, because we have good ethical standards for research nowadays. And you can't always do the highest quality study because you're often working with kids or, you know, patients who could die if they don't get access to certain kinds of treatment. And so we won't do the pinnacle of research like a double-blind placebo, because that would be wildly unethical. Like, you're just going to not give people treatment. Like, that would be horrible. So
You're going to randomly assign people to be trans and see what happens. Like,
yeah,
that's not really how this works.
right. So yeah, there's
Yeah.
lots of problems with this kind of just dismissal of academic work on it. And I think those are probably like, I don't know how many was that, 2 or 3 categories I
Yeah.
gave of arguments for getting a lot.
Yeah,
Yes.
and it's, you know, it's not only the dismissal of academic evidence, but it's because of this is the disinformation age. It's actually the spouting and repeating of the opposite of that. Like, and I've
Totally.
heard calls to your show and other shows where they'll just say the exact opposite. It's a 90% regret rate for people who have this kind of surgery. It's astounding.
Yeah. Actually,
Yeah.
some of those studies are so common. There's some studies that are like, it's funny. When you're the trans affirmative position, you have like, the body of research from the American Academy of Pediatrics to rely on, and they have like 2 or 3 studies that they cite all the time. And the one you're just referencing was like what we call the Canadian study. That part of the problem with it was that they were including all their participants were people who were attending a certain clinic. They weren't necessarily screened for being trans beforehand. So it's like, sure, it's not shocking to me that slightly higher than the general public would be trans at this population, but also the majority wouldn't be trans because not a lot of people are trans. Like it's like they're
Right.
really not
Right.
shocking findings when you actually evaluate the evidence itself. So yeah, there's quite a few of these. I think there's like 4 or 5 that come up really regularly. People cite these studies that are the one they cling on to. They hate academia until it affirms them. Then they're like, this is the real study. See, the one that affirms my position. I found it.
Right, right. What were those people not part of the big cabal that got owned by the nefarious forces and the lizard people? How did that one get through? Explain this to
Right.
me. It got through the peer review process, presumably, unless it's some of these really bad studies that people trot out that absolutely did not. But
Mhm.
uh, obviously, there's opportunity for people to have all sorts of different findings. But wow, they just don't seem to be finding these things very often. And
And so
y-
this is anecdotal, but the day prior to the last election, I was out shopping and then at a doctor's office in the waiting room, and any conversation I heard about what the people were going to vote for, they were talking about, and I'm in a very, very red area. All talking about, "Oh, no, they have to vote for Trump because of these trans issues. Children are going to school and they're coming back another sex, and the parents don't even know about it. Ninety
and they're
percent of the
eating the
athletes are just
cats and the
it's
dogs.
yeah, 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 that too. That was the
Mhm.
other thing that was going on at that time. It's unbelievable. But it's just disinformation, and there is this bias. The more you hear something, especially by people you trust, your friends and peers, the more you believe it. I don't.
Absolutely.
How do we get by that?
Yeah, I mean that's really hard. That's part of what I wanted Takis to be, the Transatlantic Call-In show, because I was trying to be able to have an opportunity for people to be like, oh, why don't I call actual trans activists to ask this question versus, my friend Bob, who often brings up random bullshit that nobody can prove. Like, you should probably want to talk to the people who are actually doing the advocating for these things if you're trying to figure out what the positions of the people advocating for these things are. And well, we don't represent, like the whole trans community. I do think we represent what the majority of trans people are kind of wanting foundationally. I think we do try our best to be like, I might have certain feelings about this specific niche position, and this other host might have these different feelings about it. But like foundationally, we agree on like what we're fighting for and what our goals are, what we're at trying to get. So that is kind of what I hope that Takis can be, but it does also become hard. We're also, it's entertainment. And so to a certain degree, we have to bring on the total clowns who are going to be total assholes and to, have blood sports debate style stuff with them. And that it isn't always my favorite quality of content to produce, but it is what people like to watch. So we try to have a healthy balance in there of like informative, polite conversation, and also got to throw down with this bigot here, for a hot minute.
Exactly. That's what people tune in for too. So there's that piece of it. And I don't know, there I was saying earlier how much I appreciate your style, and I also know people that like the more aggressive kind of throwdowns resonate with them. That is what they want to hear. That gets their attention and it gets them thinking. I think it's good to have different modes of communication for different folks.
Totally.
But yeah. Well, and so you kind of touched on this with that last piece that you were talking about with, kind of Rob brought up too with people saying, "Oh no, but the children and they're coming back, they're using litter boxes and they're gonna come back trans from school and all
Oh my
this
God,
stuff."
that's the other one. I have a person that I square dance with. She just keeps saying that over and over and over again. And every time I
Oh
ask her
my,
for any evidence, oh my God, there is none, of course.
of course
Uh-huh.
there's none.
Oh,
That's not a thing. Why are we even talking about that?
So do you
It's
know where I actually
astounding.
found where I dug into that a little bit? Do you know where that came from? There's always a spark of something in something. You know where
It's
that came
about
Yes.
from?
school shootings, right? It's like they were supposed to have litter boxes in schools in case of a school shooting or a lockdown.
Boxes of litter that you might
Right,
put on the floor or in a can or something, not litter boxes, is what you call what the cat goes in. Yes.
right.
Oh my goodness. It's incredible. It's like, what is that quote that a lie can get halfway around the world before the truth gets its shoes on?
Yep.
Oh
Yep.
yeah,
It's
Boots on.
that
Yep. Yep. Yep.
to a T. But
super true.
yeah, so kind of along those lines where people get these ideas and just kind of run off with them and get people all kinds of stirred up and confused about it. Sometimes it almost looks like one of those moral panic issues, right? Like, the satanic panic, of decades past, where everyone just all of a sudden, was so worried that this was something that was happening, but the children, they're, the daycare centers are, doing satanic rituals on the children and everything like that. Uh,
Yeah,
to some extent, we kind of see echoes of that, I think, with people just getting so up in arms about this. Would you say that this is the type of thing that you might describe as a moral panic?
absolutely. Oh, 100%. I, it's hard because I think also with these sort of moral panics and these like appeal to the children is kind of it's a trope at this point, but it's hard because I do think there is a sincere desire that is like deep in most people to protect small children. Like I said at my talk, like I don't want any kids rushed into transition. I want them to follow the evidence. And if that's a lot faster than you want, well, too fucking bad for you. But that might be the right case for, that child. And so I don't want any, like, I also want to protect children. I want them to have their best quality of life, which is why I listen to the experts who say that affirmation is the best approach. And that doesn't necessarily mean surgery or medical intervention at particularly young age, but for some, they might warrant an accelerated timeline. But yeah, I do think there's like this sincere desire in a lot of people to protect children. And I think the people who purvey this information know that that is like the easiest way to exploit a lot of people by appealing to this fear of exploitation of children. I mean, it's been how many moral panics have sort of centered on focus on the children, we're calling it a panic because it's kind of related to the satanic panic, right? And like, if you're playing D&D, we have to protect the children from the evil forces of Satan within this fun fucking tabletop game. Or like with the Gay Liberation Front, it was also about protecting the children. And, I even think some of the like anti or the like segregation defenses, but in the civil rights era were a lot about protecting the children and a lot of these sorts of things. So yeah, it it's frustrating because they're capitalizing on a real fear that I think all people empathize with and want to do something about. But it's using the combination of that and the misinformation that they have to lead them to be like, well, if these people really are doing all these awful things to children, then I don't care what happens to them. And that's, how they sort of mass sort of indoctrinate people into being comfortable with the dehumanization of trans people.
And
Yeah.
what do people love second best to their children? Their pets. So then they also got yes, they're eating your pets.
Right. Yes.
That's exactly anything that is defenseless. We've got to
Yep.
get in there and
Got
save
to
it.
protect them. Yep.
We're the saviors here. We can't let people make their own decisions and live their own damn lives. We've got to go in and save them from themselves. It's very, very exciting. Let's stop doing that, y'all. Oh, and yeah, someone is mentioning in the chat too the transgender mice. I almost forgot about the transgender mice. We got to cancel medical research because they're studying transgender mice now. All of our medical research money from the government went to that. I'm
It's
being
so ridiculous.
facetious. That did not happen.
And that's obviously also counter to the whole thing they're talking about, where they're like, oh, like, we don't know enough. We don't know enough about this thing. And it's like, so you're canceling research? Transgender mice,
Right.
for the record, don't exist. But even if they did, like, your whole contention is that you don't have enough information on this. Why would you not want more research to be done on the topic? It's because they realize that the research isn't going to come out the way they want it to unless they fix the numbers or fudge the numbers. So they just have to, again, appeal to this sort of vague sense of, but what could happen? I don't know. Anything could happen. Like they could explode. Like it's like you could really get ridiculous with it. Like there's just no end of the what ifs on that when you start going down that pathway.
Right, and that's not usually the measure that we use for things, right? Like, but did you test if they'll explode? Like,
Right.
did we do that for the latest aspirin recipe that came out? Recipe is probably not the correct word, formula. But what if they explode? I don't know. I don't know if we had a study about that, but here we all are, and no one has exploded yet that I know of
Right. Which
from
is frustrating
aspirin.
because that should be the skeptic position, right? Like until you see evidence that there's harm or evidence that it's more beneficial for them to wait till they're 18 before they start, then you shouldn't be like taking these positions on this. But a lot of people have just kind of, again, due to this appeal to like save the children and sort of things being like, oh, I don't know if they should. Children can't consent. Like, first of all, children don't consent to any procedures. Their parents consent on their behalf. That is just like universal as the system we have for kids in medicine. But also, kids are getting treatments for all kinds of things that change their body irreversibly. What if your child has cancer? Are you going to say, oh, no, no chemo for me because that's going to affect them for the rest of their life? Like, no, of course you give it to them because that, despite the fact that there could be some sort of risks, you acknowledge that the best path forward, the best evidence we have is that you should probably follow this treatment guideline. And then hopefully they will have a better life than they would have if they didn't get the access to that treatment.
Right. And just, use the same standards across the board. And I think it's
Mhm.
exactly like you say, people want to shift that burden of proof and shift the level of evidence that they want because, well, actually, if we used the same standard across the board, it wouldn't come out in favor of the position that they're advocating. And that's not really a great way. If we're being intellectually honest with ourselves, that's probably not the way to decide. But it
Totally.
and it is very telling, I think, too, when we talk about this issue. Sometimes I don't know if this comes up for you very much, but we had this come up in some of our social media posts, even about it, where people take issue with this term transphobia. The title of your talk at the American Atheist was "Confronting Transphobia in the Secular
Uh-huh.
Community," and we used a similar title for this talk. And we had people, immediately being, I don't want to say triggered, but I'm going to say triggered by that term, and saying things like, "Why do you say I'm afraid? It's not a phobia." And yet it does seem like an emotional response. But does that come up for you very often? And how would you respond to that critique of even the use of the term
Can I
transphobia?
follow up with that before you answer it, Arden,
Sure.
the same thing? Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I posted this talk on a lot of Facebook groups, one of which was Four Horsemen of the Anti-Apocalypse, Dawkins Den at Harrison Hitchens. And I cannot believe the amount of pushback on this there. But one of them, I'll skim it here. Interesting. Why is opposition to trans need to be labeled transphobic? So that's just what Kara said. And then they go on to talk about what we were kind of talking about before. Watch out for, because children are defenseless, and apparently so are women. Trans men pose no threat to males as a general rule, but trans women, most of which are attracted to females, can pose a risk and can make women and girls uncomfortable in private places. And it goes on. So yeah.
Yeah, I hear this kind of thing a lot. So I think first of all, when it comes to like etymologically, phobia doesn't just mean fear, it means fear or aversion, right? Like when something is hydrophobic, that material is not afraid of water, it is averse to water, so it repels it, right? So first of all, phobia is perfectly acceptable definition, but also there are so many words in the English language where the etymological roots don't follow how we use it today.
Mhm.
Um, and homophobia has been a very clearly established like way of using that term. And I think when trans activists were kind of building, our momentum, we were just like, yeah, transphobia makes sense because it is already in the common use. People understand what we're talking about when we say this term. So I think, first of all, they're just wrong on the etymology and they're wrong on the fact that the etymology matters at all. But like, secondly, to this point of like, why should we label people who are opposed to trans rights transphobic, right? I think it's not that I'm labeling people who, because like I said earlier, like I can't control what's in your mind. I can't control how you feel about trans people or whether you think we're legitimate. I have no impact on that other than me hopefully putting out good information that can convince you. But fundamentally, like you are convinced of what you're convinced of. And I don't have a problem with people. like, I don't want to be your friend, but if you don't think I'm a woman or you don't think trans people are valid, I don't want to be your friend, but I don't care. Like, if you aren't impacting my way of life, then fine. The problem is, much like when we're having this conversation, from the separation of religion and government perspective as atheists, the problem is not that you are religious per se, at least for a lot of us. I know for some people it is, but it's not always about that. It's more about you are trying to create a world where I can't live my life freely, right? You are voting for policies that hurt people, that are not evidence based, that go against the science in so many cases. This isn't about me like just having a disagreement, right? Like you can think whatever you want about trans people, but the fact is, if you are voting for and advocating for policies or ideas or politicians that are going to remove my ability to interact with the world, then that to me is clearly you have some sort of aversion to trans people. You don't want us to have free and fair access to society. You want us to largely disappear from your like awareness, right? So yeah, I mean, I just kind of reject this notion. And also, I said in my talk that to me, like calling someone transphobic or calling someone racist or calling someone bigoted isn't. People have this notion that like when you get that assessment, that it is a character assessment, and that I'm saying the entirety of your character sums up to somebody who hates trans people. And that is not what I mean when I use terms like racist, transphobic, homophobic, or bigot. I'm generally trying to say that you have this fear or aversion to, or to point out that like you are operating from a bias that you are like we've been talking about throughout this whole conversation, that is like not being fairly applied to everyone, that is specifically harming the trans community. So I just feel like I understand that people have that reaction to it. And that's kind of part of why I use the term. I had considered not using it, but I kind of wanted to use it and then right off the bat have that conversation. That way I could kind of put those defensive walls maybe back down and like let us get into the conversation of like, what is transphobia and does it apply to you? And if it does apply to you, does that mean you're the worst person and that I never want to talk to you and that you're not welcome in any atheist spaces? Like, no, of course not. But if you acknowledge that you think trans people are less valuable or deserving of less rights, you might not be welcome in a lot of spaces because a lot of, at least the on like the online atheist spaces are very progressive at large. And so like a lot of people might not want to be around you if you're being like, I just have a different idea about trans people, and that's that they're second class citizens and that they don't deserve free access to society. Like that sounds kind of gross to me. That doesn't work for like I consider myself a humanist. That doesn't seem to align with my humanism at all. So um yeah, I just kind of reject this notion that we can't call a spade a spade. We can't just call you like if you're being transphobic, like that was transphobic. Let's talk about it. I think for a lot of people, they just feel like it's a conversation ender. I mean, no, I think we've all been through this. Like my dad is a very racist person, and throughout my whole life, I remember he would make comments, and I would be like, "Wow, that was really racist. I can't believe you just said that." And he would be like, "I'm not racist. I don't hate Black people." Like then that's what they think. If it has to
Mhm.
be like your whole character is about hating this group in a lot of people's mind to be fairly called a racist or a transphobe. And I just don't view it that way. I think the word is that's not what most activists in my experience mean when they say the word. I do see some people lodge it at people in sort of an insulting way, but generally speaking, I think it's not meant to be an insult in and of itself.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's one of those terms I think where, a lot of times when people are using the term, they're talking about, like you said, the impacts that you are having through using this type of speech or the types of behaviors or the things you're advocating for. They are having these kind of harmful effects and impacts out in the world. And yet,
Mhm.
when people receive that feedback, they take it as some kind of personal attack on themselves. And now we've got to talk about how no, 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 but I have good intentions and I'm a nice person. Well, I don't care, that's irrelevant. You're having this impact over here, and that's what we're talking about.
Totally.
And yeah. Yeah, that's I no, I think it's great that you just come straight out with it and have the conversation. This is what we mean by this. Because kind of to your point too, this seems like one of those things where also people can really hijack a conversation. And if we're over here splitting hairs over, well, but what does the word binary actually mean in crickets? Then what we're not talking about is how I'm impacting people with my speech and my decisions that I'm making in my life. And that's really the important conversation to be having. And
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, didn't want to interrupt your train.
nope, nope, that was it. The train was done. But actually, that is an excellent segue to another topic that we were going to discuss, which is, you know, in the recovering from religion space, we have a lot of folks, probably a lot of us here included, who may have grown up in belief systems that aggressively stigmatize the whole LGBTQ plus community and enforced very strict gender norms and really kind of ingrained in people that perhaps this aversion that we were just referring to, and people who are kind of now recovering from religion or having questions or coming out of their faith and deconstructing and all that may still be walking around with some of those thoughts and feelings and ideas that they through no fault of their own were brought up with. So I'm wondering what do you think people can do if they are just kind of having that experience and, "Hey, this is the first time I've really even thought about this issue." Maybe, like you mentioned in your hometown, that, like, people had never heard of or met a trans person before, and they were just completely shocked and didn't know what to do with that. What can people do if they find that they do have, for whatever reason, baggage around this issue, but they want to know more?
Yeah, I mean, this is so multivariate, so I'm going to try my best to like kind of hit the points that I think seem the most important to me. Um, I think first, if you aren't like talking directly to that person or interacting with them, and you're just kind of observing that you're having thoughts and feelings about it, I urge people to give themselves a little bit of grace because, like you're saying, I think we're raised with a lot of these things. They're very heavily indoctrinated into us. There's so much media about the disgust that society has with trans people, and so I don't think it's necessarily always an intentional thing. I think a lot of it is that sort of innate reaction. And I think, like as a white person, like I've noticed that stuff growing up. Like I'm like, oh wow, yeah, growing up with a racist dad like really had an impact on me. And so I'm often like asking myself questions when I'm having thoughts or interactions or conversations and being like, ooh, was what I said problematic in any way? Because that kind of felt like maybe that could be, and kind of exploring that a little, like being willing to open that up and like actually ask yourself that question without being too judgmental towards yourself towards it. Um, I think secondly, I really recommend like getting into media that is like trans affirmative. Like read a good memoir from a trans person. Like Redefining Realness by Janet Mock is pretty great. I forget the title. Jennifer Finney Boylan has a great one. Kate Bornstein has a great novel that is like she considers herself non-binary, but she went through a stage kind of thinking of herself as a trans woman, but it's like very gender fuckery. So, if you're kind of like uncomfortable with like the fuckery of gender and you want to get that, that is a great place to start. And there's so many good like TV shows and stuff. Pose is phenomenal. I think a good representation of, at least in some of the earlier seasons that I haven't seen the more recent stuff, of kind of queer culture. Uh, and you can also call into my show if you want to have a conversation like with trans people about it. And you're like, maybe you had that conversation with yourself and you were like, oh, that thought I had feels like that could maybe be rooted in some transphobic beliefs that I have. Like, I want to explore that. Like, call. Like, that's what we're there for. So I definitely want people to feel comfortable to be able to like ask those questions. Like, I'm not gonna be judgmental or hateful to you if you come in using like not perfect language, right? Like, I want to meet people where they're at and tell them that like it's okay. There's room over here for you to kind of grow and learn and like get more comfortable with these topics. But it really does have to do with normalizing trans people in your day-to-day experience. Like knowing trans people, you could wear a pin to like work that says like you are safe here, or something like that. And like if somebody encounters you about it, like have a conversation and be honest. Be like, I'm I was raised with these beliefs and like I'm not trying to make you an educator for me. Don't do that to strangers. Do that to people like me. Um, but you can be honest about where you're coming from and be like, I just want to get to know and learn more about trans people because I do have respect for you, like foundationally, but you have those indoctrinated beliefs. A lot of trans people are going to be so open and amenable to like kind of opening that door or having that conversation, or at least knowing that like, hey, this person's going to shoot it straight with me. They're not going to be, because I can tell you as a trans person, when somebody has shitty beliefs about trans people, um, I this is gonna sound the most like wooey thing I've ever said. This is just like a purely intuition thing, but I have almost never been wrong when I interact with somebody and I'm like, man, I don't think this guy really thinks trans people are real. There's some shit going on here. And I'm not going to name names, but with multiple people that I have met in the atheist skeptic community, it has later come out that they had those beliefs and feelings. And I was like, man, how did I'm always going to treat people with respect and meet them where they're at. Like he hasn't been disrespectful to me, so I'm not going to say anything. And then, oh, there it is. There it is. There are those feelings. I knew they were there somewhere. We can really feel that. So I think when you're used to most of society kind of looking down on you or thinking of a second class citizen, you get a pretty fine-tuned sensor for that. So yeah, I do just appreciate the straightforward honesty about where people are coming from and trying to be respectful.
Yeah, I completely agree. I have one of those pins on my bag at work too that says "You're safe with me." I love those. I
Yeah,
recommend those to people all the time. It's the first go-to when people say, "How can I be an ally?" I'm like, "Get this pin and let us
totally.
know. Make people feel safer." But yeah, to your point, like I always like as a non-binary person, like I am always happy to answer people's like genuine and sincere questions. And like you can tell if it's a sincere question, even if it's like okay, it's a little cringe or someone's using a term that isn't quite right. It's fine. If you're coming from a place of sincerity, it's totally okay. Like people can tell if you're being a jerk and they can tell if you're not usually. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, let's see. Any other tips or advice along those lines for people before we go on to the next question, which is probably going to be our last one before we go to Q&A?
I don't think so. I think I had all my points there. Yeah.
Okay, good. Then I guess the last kind of question, we've touched on this already quite a bit, but do you want to say any more about what we can do to combat misinformation and transphobia in the secular community?
Just ask yourself, where does that come from? Just like we tell the people on a lot of these call-in shows about religious belief, like how do you know that? Are you sure about that? Like let's actually investigate where that comes from and why you think that. Ask yourself those questions all the time. That is going to be the biggest thing. Just apply your skepticism evenly.
That's great. And don't be a jerk.
That's it.
I love it. Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. This has been amazing as always, and I do want to get to some questions. Before we go to Q&A though, is there anything else that you want to share, including where can people find you and your work?
Yeah, I'm at the Arden Hart on almost everything. I actually just started my own personal YouTube. Despite working with the line for 4 years, I haven't been posting anything. And really the only thing on there is like the talk and 2 episodes of Takis, like some clips and stuff. So, but I am planning to produce some original content. So you can check me out there or on the line Thursdays at 2 p.m. Central Time. And I'm on like Instagram a lot. So that's probably my number one source outside of YouTube.
Awesome. And where can people find your new YouTube show?
I think it's just the Arden Hart still is
Okay.
my username. I might be wrong. I'll double check that.
Okay. We'll
You think
put
I
the
would know
link in the
this
chat.
thing? I'm yes, it's the Arden Hart. YouTube.com/at the Arden Hart.
Perfect. We'll drop it in the chat so people can check it out, and then you can grow your channel too.
Yeah.
And hey, just to remind everybody, it is not a coincidence that we have someone from the line on RfRx this week, because the line is hosting the annual
Yes.
RFR fundraiser on
Let's
May
go.
10th. Yes. So thank you so much for collaborating with us on that. I know you have all of y'all have been working tirelessly behind the scenes to get that up and running and to make that an amazing event, as it has been the last several years in a row. So thank you for
Yeah,
that
we're
and for
so
being here.
excited. I think we've got a few more like sort of our greater friends who we've had on as guests who are going to be involved this year, that's really exciting. We're hopefully going to get quite a lot of people to do some like stuff ahead of the stream too, but it's going to be May 10th, I believe, starting at 2 p.m. Central Time. I don't remember if I got that. Oh no, it's not 2 p.m. anymore. Okay, what is do we know the time? 12 p.m. 12 p.m. Central Time.
Yes, it is.
And I think we're going for like 6 or 8 hours or something like that. It's gonna be a long time.
It's 12.
It's it's 12. Well, oh right. But the stream is the stream 12 hours? Oh my God. Okay. Well, I'm
Yep, it is.
buckled up, I guess. Here we go, everybody. But yeah, so definitely tune in for that. I'm spending the entirety of the next week working on visual assets and prepping all that good stuff. So we're really excited. We're aiming for 60,000 this year, right? Is that, or was I supposed to say that? I don't know if I'm supposed to say that.
I think it's okay
Okay,
to say
yeah.
goal.
That's the goal. But I mean, last year the goal was 50 and we reached like 70. So I think we can probably blow that out of the water. I know you guys are so hyped about it and you were excited for it too. So let's smash that goal for sure.
Absolutely. And yeah, thank you again for all of your work. It means so much to the organization and to all of the people who get to benefit from the services that we have so that they can recover from religion and get rid of some of this baggage and the kinds of things that we talked about this evening. So thank you for that and for sharing all of your other insights with us. And I did drop the links to your YouTube channel and the Takis channel, as well as your at Arden Hart, the Arden
Awesome.
Hart on socials. Yeah, so people can find you there. And I am being reminded that we need to share the poll results. So
Yeah.
let's take a
By
look
the
at
way,
those. Thank you,
sometimes
Rob.
people ask, like, if you're all volunteers, what do you need money for? So I spent over an hour and a half talking to somebody from Australia who called in on our dime. So yeah, that's some of where the money goes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Oh, yeah. And it's, things just add up. That's exactly right. Zoom licenses and everything that we do, having the support groups and being able to host those on Zoom and have events on Meetup and all those kinds of things just add up. So yes, thank you for your support. And we do absolutely appreciate it and use that to get more resources out to more people. And with that, I will now share the poll results. So we asked at the beginning of the show, are sex and gender two different things? And wow, 91% of people answered yes. Good job, y'all. That is the expected answer. 5% of people said no, and 5% were not sure, which is a great reason to come to a talk like this so you can learn more about it.
Yeah, I want to talk to those people in the hangout because even Dawkins and Coyne would say, yes, those are different things.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
I
surprising.
I know people who reject the idea of those being different things, kind of on I think it's on the basis that it just shuts down the conversation. So for example, some people in my family who are very kind of fundamentalist religious will say, no, sex and gender are not two different things. Gender is something the feminists made up. The women's libbers made that up in the 1960s and 70s to try and do things that are unnatural. That's not real. Your sex, your biology determines your life outcomes. Quit trying to act like it's optional. And so I'm not saying that's what the people who answered yes in this poll or answered no in this poll are saying, but I have received that argument in the past. So there's that. It's exciting. So next up, we have, do you embrace all of the gender roles and expectations assigned to you? And I love asking this kind of question because there is always such a diversity of experience on this. And I think that is completely valid. 7% of people said, yes, I love them all. 29% of people mostly. embrace the gender roles and expectations that were assigned to them. 60% of people said no, take it away. That is the camp that I fall into personally. 12% of people said not sure, never thought about it, and 5% of people said what are gender roles, which also legit question. We spelled it like rolls, like dinner rolls, just because we're trying to be cute. So, Arden, what are your thoughts on this question and on the array of responses that we got?
Yeah, I think I put mostly, and it
Mhm.
seems like it's interesting. Only 7%, 3 people said yes, I love them all. That is interesting. So I can't imagine most anyone feels like they completely align with all of the roles and expectations put upon them. Like that would be kind of weird to me to have not you just like love them all. That's a little strange to me, but valid. Some people feel that way. So like cool. But wow, I'm surprised that the majority said no, take it away. That is really interesting. I mean, because well, I do appreciate like some of the roles and kind of expectations as a woman, identifying as a
Mhm.
woman. But I can see how, they're obviously very restrictive in so many ways. And so I can see why some people might even be like, no, just I hate it. I don't like any of the expectations of the roles. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and of course, these polls are always we're kind of self-selecting into this population of people answering this poll. We knew what
Sure.
the topic of tonight's talk was going to be about, so that may have been more interesting to folks who felt this way about gender roles and expectations. We're not the Pew Research Center here. These poll results do not necessarily reflect the wider views of the entire population, just the folks who
So,
wanted to come
Tara,
to the
you're
talk
telling me this
tonight.
is not scientific? Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, unfortunately, yes.
Oh,
As well, as long as we don't overgeneralize our results beyond, what they actually pertain to, we could say that this may be somewhat representative of the opinions of the people who answered the poll who are
mm.
here tonight.
We could start using it as a hypothesis to try to disprove any of these things. Yes, that might work.
Yeah. So we've gone down a rabbit hole, but on to the fun question. What is your favorite non-binary animal? Let's see what we got here. We got 7% of people voted for the whiptail lizards, which we had a debate or not a debate, but a discussion in the pre-show about whether those were the same or different from the lesbian geckos. And I think we decided those may be two different things.
Definitely different.
Definitely different. Definitely different. I think AI tried to confuse us, but we did more digging than that. Let's see. We got frogs, got 19% respectable vote there. Spotted hyenas only got 5% of the vote. I'm surprised. I think they were on the cover of one of the books that got recommended to Glenda at the American Atheist Convention called Bitch, and it kind of goes over some related topics. 19% also vote for cuttlefish, so they are tied with the frogs. Only 2% of people voted for the monkey, probably because I mispronounced the name, most likely. So we didn't do the monkey justice there. 5% of people selected snails or slugs, and a whopping 29% selected Homo sapiens. Well done, well done.
Love
And
it.
then, yeah. And then we had 14% who voted for something else. And I saw a few options go into the chat. Oh, thank you. Someone is letting me know I misspelled the monkey. So that could have been part of the reason for their low votes. We'll try again and do a recount next time. I'm just kidding. We're not going to do this poll again. But but thanks for sharing your opinions with us on that, folks. Arden, what would your selection be?
I mean, listen, I'm a reptile fan, okay? So it's hard for me to turn down whiptail lizards or lesbian geckos, or I know there's like an agomid that is also like female exclusively asexual reproduction that did like the same like stimulating sexual stuff. I just love reptiles, so I'm a fan of the whiptail lizards.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Yes, we are reptile fans here as well. Okay, well, let's go on to questions so that we have time to get through as many as we can. We do have a lot of questions, so apologies in advance, folks, if we don't get to yours. We will do our best, though. Arden, are you ready to answer some questions from the audience?
Let's go. Let's do it.
Awesome. Okay, Rob, do you want to start us off with a question?
Yeah, we'll go from the top here. Let's see. This is a personal question. How did you know for sure that you were trans? And the person said, I'm questioning my own gender right now. I'm not saying that I am and not saying that I'm not. I'm just confused. So how does one know for sure if they are trans?
Yeah, this is something we get almost every week on Takis. So I think it's important to say first at first, like, again, there's no blood test. You're not gonna get like a came back trans like test. That just doesn't exist. Um, for me, I had just my whole life, every time I was put into a situation where my family or the group I was in tried to put me with boys, I had problems. I felt wrong or gross or confused, or like I was being separated from my friends who were girls. And it was a lot of just discordance with how every single social situation went down with that expectation. But I think as I got into my 20s and I was starting to like really explore these feelings a little bit more seriously, um, for me, it was recognizing one that like feelings that existed my whole life. So, when you're 20 years into your life and you've been feeling this way the whole time, that's probably a pretty good indicator that that's not something that's just going to go away. I think the other thing is like, you know, I think trying to have the label ironed out is the wrong question. I think you should ask yourself, like, what's going to feel good for you? Like, growing your hair out or maybe getting laser hair removal. Like, let's start with those steps because those don't have quite as many massive implications and they can kind of help you be like, wow, I actually feel closer aligned to myself when I did that. I feel like I'm honing in on like my authentic self. And that can kind of help you suss out the question. But I think trying to like be like, I deduced absolutely that I am in fact truly trans in my brain. It's not possible. And every trans person feels like they're not trans enough in the early stages. So I think trying to do those like lower stakes questions about what's going to help you live a better life and feel more comfortable in your skin will help you get to that answer.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have kind of a somewhat related question here. You may have already touched on the answer, but you can say more about it if you want to. This person recognizes that the question may come off sounding like a gotcha, and they're saying that they are in full support of trans rights, but they're wondering about, they said they're a cis male, but they really don't know what it means to feel male.
Mm.
And they're wondering, like, is that just a cis thing, or am I missing some strong identity feeling that many people have? How would they know?
Yeah, I mean, so there are people who just feel like they don't associate with the concept of gender altogether, and that could be what you're experiencing. But I do think, especially for cis men, there can be an experience of there are virtually no consequences and no impact of your gender on your experience of the world. And so it can feel like it doesn't matter because you're not running into people who are telling you that you aren't good enough to do this or thing because of your gender, that those aren't experiences you're having. So you're not really being faced with like the consequences of your gender in society as much. And I think sometimes that can lead people to feel like they're apathetic towards it, when in fact, if I transed you right now, made you wake up tomorrow in a woman's body, you would actually feel a lot of dysphoria and a lot of discomfort trying to interact with the world and interface the way you normally do when the world's reading you differently. So um, I can't suss out for you whether you have true gender apathy or whether you are just, not really experiencing the consequences of like your privilege. But um, and that's not meant to be like a you're so privileged thing. I just, as a cis man, you're going to not encounter things that trans people and that women do. Um, so yeah, that's kind of where I come from on that one.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me too. I know we sometimes see this when we're talking about race and ethnicity too. A lot of times, people who are white and they are in a
Mm.
society where that's the majority, it's almost like thought of as kind of almost the default, that everything is kind of referenced around. People will sometimes say things like, "Oh, well, I don't really have an ethnicity. I'm just white," and it's like
Mhm.
they don't see it as applying to themselves. They recognize that there are lots of other ethnicities that other people are having, but theirs is almost like the default, and so you don't really recognize it because it's just already kind of baked into everything. I don't know if that
Yep.
might be similar to what you were describing there.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is like the white and cis male as normal sort of
Mhm.
standard that we apply to the world.
Yeah, it's the default. You're already the default.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair. All right. Let's see. Next question, Rob, what do we have?
Yeah, going in order here. As a gay person, I feel that I am trans adjacent. Do you think that that term makes sense? That concept makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think as a gay person, especially if you're involved in like queer culture and like you're expressing yourself as a queer person, you're kind of already subverting society's expectations for you as like a man or woman. And so I can imagine that that would feel kind of adjacent for sure.
So I'm going to make a follow-up to that. I mean, I've recently seen people posting, I think in the gay community, where they will say, this is the LBG, and they purposely drop off the T.
Mhm.
So yeah, what's going on there?
Well, I mean, tale as old as time, right? That when we were dealing with like minority groups trying to fight for their rights, there are people in associated groups who are going to pull the ladder up behind them. Oh, wow, you're focusing on them now? Cool. I got mine. Fuck you. Good luck. Like, I'm not going to help you. I think it's yeah, a bit of an I got mine and you can get yours on your own time kind of thing. Although I will say, when polled, gay people and gay women in particular are like the biggest supporters of trans rights. So I don't think that actually represents
So you think that's a
even a
minority thing within the community, and maybe they're
absolutely
loud. They're loud.
even the LGBT Alliance in the UK, I don't know if it's still the case, but for a while their founders were lesbian, most of their members were not queer at all. So it was the LGBT Alliance, but was full of straight people. So there's, it's not always being represented well in the public sphere, that conversation. What meaningful portion of the LGB are against the T?
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
Yep.
that's a great point. Okay, let's see. Oh, you mentioned this a little bit earlier. If you want to expand on it at all, now is the time. Or if you don't want to, we'll go to the next question.
Okay.
How do you think the trans ruling in the UK will affect possible laws in the US?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely it's going to inform things. I mean, we already know that, while they were doing hearings for laws in various states in the US, they reference some of the UK's politics as like evidence of their position. They will reference things like the Cass report to defend some of the laws that they're proposing. So it almost certainly kind of like this just weird self-referential like circular loop that they like to do. Um, where they'll be like, "Oh, I'm right because they said we're right in the UK, and in the UK they're saying they're right because of bigotry happening here." It's yeah, it is a like self-fulfilling prophecy. So I'm sure it will affect stuff here, but I mean, it probably already has, to be honest. I mean, I know that a lot of states are going through the stage of having hearings from the public on a lot of their laws. Texas is doing a lot of that right now. And I imagine that a lot of the supporters of these bills will be referencing things like this.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, what's up next, Rob? I think we've got time for a couple of more questions.
Okay, well, somebody posted a question about Coyne and Dawkins, and since I was at the SciCons where both of them spoke a year apart, I want to ask that question. It is, why do you think some old atheist biologists, Coyne Dawkins, are unwilling to accept the academic consensus about trans people? Moreover, they even claim that their positions are the academic consensus. For instance, Coyne claimed at his SciCon talk that he doesn't know any biologists who disagree with his position about sex being binary.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to know for sure, but I mean, like we already know there are phenomena like where people who are really well knowledged in a field after time have a hard time accepting or digesting or integrating new information into their worldview. So I think that is probably an element of it. I also think there have been some polls that went out to biologists that were like, do you think sex is binary or not? And in like one of them, I think that they did say the majority thought it was binary, but then they also acknowledged that there was exceptions. So it's like it's again, I think this is an instance of when trans people are saying binary, we're meaning truly binary, one of two options, no exceptions. And when they say binary, they're talking about something that is not truly binary. It is bimodal. It is two outcomes primarily with some degree of variance in the middle there.
Yeah,
But I mean,
that was Novella's position when he gave his talk here. Bimodal.
yeah,
Yeah.
Well,
okay, yeah.
and what I find so interesting about that, though, is, yeah, I do think that's what's going on. A lot of times when pressed with follow-up question after follow-up question, it comes out to be, well, when I say binary, I mean, there might be a few exceptions, but the trend is, overwhelmingly these two things with some exceptions. But
Mhm.
what's interesting about the choice of words there is that oftentimes those are the talking points that people are using to invalidate trans people and the trans experience. And if it truly is their position that, okay, well, I think sex is binary and this is related to gender as well in my mind. And it's, when I say binary, I mean it's 90% or 99% are one way and maybe 1% are an exception. That shouldn't invalidate trans people existing, right? I mean, we all agree that it's a small percentage of the population.
Yeah, I haven't validated this, but I know Forrest likes to say, oh, 1% of the human population is equivalent to the size of Russia. So like, we're just going to say that, oh, because 1%, we just missed them. And like, that's millions and millions of people. Like, it doesn't make any sense. So yeah, I agree that exceptions don't disprove the rule. But if the rule you're saying is that most people are bimodally male or female, and there are some exceptions, then we agree. But if you're saying that the rule is that it's a true binary with only two options and there are exceptions, that is incoherent. That those statements cannot exist simultaneously.
Right. And I think that really falls apart when people rely on those talking points to then, come out with, what end up being very transphobic ideas about, oh, we need to have laws and push back and oh, but what about the children? Well, it just doesn't follow. Okay, I'm off my
Mhm.
soapbox. Okay, let's go on to the next question, which is, yeah, what do you think about trans men largely being on the periphery of the trans issue? Do you think it's the heteronormative role that patriarchy places on women to satisfy the male gaze and sexual appetite, that a man, they argue, cannot? Obviously, this is not accurate, but because their bias blocks them from figuring out the difference between sex and gender. Um, what are your thoughts on that and kind of how trans men end up not often being the center focal point of these conversations?
Yeah, there's so many elements of this. It's going to be hard to get them all. I'm sure I'm going to miss important points, but I think for one, you know, I think they view trans women as a bigger threat to their worldview because trans women are sort of abandoning their role at the top of the hierarchy, so to speak. And so I think that is more egregious to a lot of people. I think also it's easier to attack like trans women in sports than it is to attack trans men in sports. They have this notion of people assigned female as always being inferior, like at a baseline. And so the notion of trans men competing against men, they're like, oh, well, that's not a concern because women are inferior and that's never going to become a problem. So we can just disregard that conversation altogether.
Because
Um,
no trans men have ever competed in the Olympics or anything like that.
yeah, it is.
That would be crazy.
It's such a strange. It sort of betrays the fact that they already hold this worldview about like sort of women as inferior at a baseline and men as superior in pretty much every domain. So that's how I view that. But I'm sure there's important points that I'm missing. And Dr. Ben, our resident trans man on Transatlantic, would be a good probably person to ask that question to as well.
Yes, so tune in to the Transatlantic Call-In show and you can ask Dr. Ben about that.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I see misogyny and transphobia as being just so inextricably intertwined. I don't even see how you could untangle them. They are constantly in dialogue with one another, it seems to me. So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, I think we have time for one more question. Rob, you get to pick.
Okay. Here comes a big one. So the question is, and I'm going to have a follow-up. The person asked, how do you suggest we respond to the rhetoric, quote, a biological man cannot become a biological woman? And my follow-up is, I was in the audience when Richard Dawkins said, I don't have the exact quote, but this has to be about 99% accurate. A man saying he is now a woman, or vice versa, is equivalent to Catholics saying the host becomes the body of Christ in transubstantiation.
Yeah. So I kind of touched on this earlier, but usually when they're saying this, they're framing it as like a biological man cannot become a biological woman. Well, cool. If I use your definitions, no trans person is saying that. I am not saying that when I transition, I am indistinguishable from a cis woman. I'm not. I don't know my chromosomes, to be honest. I have never been karyotyped, but I'm going to go ahead and assume that there's a good likelihood they're XY. I can't change my chromosomes. I would say that whether or not a trans person becomes female or a trans man becomes male is actually kind of up for grabs, in my opinion, because when you're talking about changing your genitals, your secondary sex characteristics, your hormone profile, like your risk of a lot of diseases starts to look maybe not exactly like the sex you're transitioning to, but but not like the sex that you were assigned at birth. And so at that point, the kind of notion of biological sex as this fixed category starts to kind of fall apart around trans people. And so I'm not saying that when I transitioned, I became the same as a cis woman. I am a trans woman. There's lots of things about not lots of things, but there's like small things like I'm never going to be able to carry children, at least not with the current technology, right? I would love to be a parent someday, but that is just not a biological possibility for me. So I I think it's to point out that that's not what trans activists are saying. No trans activist is saying that trans women become the same as cis women. I know Sam Harris loves this too, where he'll be like, "Oh, just say that there's any difference between them is a thought crime." Nobody's saying that. I can't enforce thought crimes. I don't know what that means. That sounds like some crybaby self-victimizing bullshit to me.
Yeah, I love it
Okay,
when
thank you.
people proclaim
Connor,
loudly on their platform that they're being silenced.
Yeah.
can we mark the time and cut this clip out and send it to Richard?
Yes. I'm
I'd
for it.
really like him to stop saying that. I saw him say that on his podcast recently too. It's like, oh
And
my
the
God.
thing is, I'm sure there is some trans person out there who has said, I'm indistinguishable from a cis woman. But again, you can find somebody who thinks anything. I'm out here talking to activists all the time. I'm defending these positions all the time. I have made very clear what my position is on this issue. And I've never gotten pushback from the trans community on that position. So again, I think to the extent that you can find a person or two who thinks that, that is not representative of any meaningful portion of the trans community. It's not what the experts are saying when they're talking about, the success and the efficacy of gender affirming care. It is just made up.
Thank you for clarifying.
No problem.
Excellent. We will have a clip to send out to folks if necessary.
Right on.
I love it. Okay, well, I know we are getting close to the end of time. We didn't quite get to all of the questions, but if you do have a question that we didn't get to, stick around for the hangout. Now, Arden, are you gonna be able to hang out with us at all? No pressure, but
Yeah, let's do it.
awesome. Okay, great. Well, let's wrap up and we can go to that. Again, thank you so much for joining us and spending your evening with us and sharing your knowledge and insights. It is amazing to have you on, and I love talking with you. So, thank you for joining us. And everyone, don't forget to join Arden on her shows on YouTube. I'll drop the links one more time. And don't forget to join us next week. Same time, same channel. We're here every week. And next week, we have Bertha Vasquez, who will be talking about filling the vacuum left behind by religion with a love for science. So that sounds really interesting to me. I cannot wait. And other upcoming guests that we have are Nathan Lentz, Graham Martin, Dr. Daryl Ray, who will be coming up in a few weeks, and Adrian Hill, among many others. So stay tuned and keep joining us here for more content like this. And don't forget to follow us on the social medias. It helps other people find us and learn about our services. We understand, of course, some people may not want to openly like or share things that say recovering from religion. If you have people in your life that don't know that you're having questions or anything like that, that's totally okay. We understand. But if you do feel comfortable, feel free to like and subscribe and share. We're on Facebook. Excuse me. We're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, and of course YouTube, where you can find 234 previous episodes of RfRx. So if you don't know what to do with yourself and you need some more things to listen to or watch, that's a good place to start. And with that, Rob, how else can people get involved?
Yes, you can get involved by helping us here. You can volunteer. We've learned that healing can come from helping other people heal. All of the services are supported by our staff of volunteers. We're always in need of more people. There's all sorts of jobs besides working the helplines. If you listen to the shows on the line or the Atheist Experience and its sister shows, they're always talking, about people calling us, but that's the tip of the iceberg. We have so many other jobs for people here if you don't want to be on the phone or chatting to people directly. We need people to find and vet and then post good resources for our clients and the agents to use. We need people to host support groups. We need people to support the online community, the Slack community. Those channels get moderated. We even need IT support. And of course, what we're doing here right now, we need hosts and behind the scenes people to help out with these, and people who can even edit and upload the shows to audio and to YouTube. So to apply to volunteer, fill out the form on our main page. It's recoveringfromreligion.org/volunteer. And lastly, I will mention there's a 3-minute video on the main page, which is at the bottom. It's called RFR, What We Do, and it's just a 3-minute summary of all of our services that you've heard about tonight, and that way you can refresh your memory and or send it to friends and family who may need our support. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you. And with that, let me hand it off to Dr. Daryl Ray to close us out for the evening with his benediction as a high priest of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. He is imbued with those powers.
Bless you, my child. Yes. Next time you can kiss my ring sometime. I guess that makes me the high priest because I've got a ring, and the Pope doesn't have one anymore. He's going the other way, I guess. But anyway, great respect for what you guys are doing, Arden, at the Transatlantic show. I actually was on it several years, well, before COVID even, I think I was on. But we love Dr. Ben here too. They even came to the excursion this last year, and had a lot of good stuff to talk about. But back when I was writing my book Sex and God, this was one area that I really needed a lot of education in. So I had to really dive deep down, and what I was writing turns out was accurate. I'm glad I researched the science well. But what I'm really happy about is I wrote a few paragraphs on the subject, and yet we got people like Nathan Lentz coming on here that have done amazing stuff, and I'm just loving that this whole subject is getting explored. And it's not just for the one issue of trans people; it's the fact that we are animals, and as we saw in the pre-show question, our crazy questions about all the different animals, we're just like all those other animals, and we have a whole variety of ways in which our sex and sexuality can be expressed. And I think we just have this Christian notion that we're special on this planet and that we're different than all these other creatures that do all sorts of things with their genetics and with their gametes and with their genitals and identities and all that sort of stuff. So I'm all about trying to challenge people's religious ideologies, and I think one of the best ways to attack it is to attack it through sexuality. because religion thinks it's got a lock in that area, and the more we can blow that open, the easier we literally need to teach people how to deconstruct their religious sexuality. And I think trans people are on the cutting edge. They're on the bleeding edge of this deconstruction journey that's really being forced into our culture. And I think rightfully so. It's time we stop behaving like we're some special creation of some god and realize we're part of the animal kingdom. So that's my sermon for tonight. So does that work for you, Kara?
We'll accept it. Also, you've been nominated in the chat for secular pope.
Oh, okay, good. I will accept that nomination. And last but not
You gotta
least,
make it. You gotta make it to Rome and get into the conclave before they close the doors.
well, Trump and I are going to be in competition, I guess, for the Pope. I just want to say something. If you folks have not seen Arden's talk, it's on YouTube now. Go watch it. It is the best talk I have ever seen on all issues trans, but it's so much bigger than just that. Some of the questions she asks and answers in that talk are relevant to a wider range of issues that we all should be thinking about. It was really a master class in critical thinking skills, I thought. In some ways. I mean, Arden, I know what Arden's mission was, but Arden had applied critical thinking in ways that I don't think a lot of people, including me, there was stuff she said, Arden, stuff you said that I thought, well, damn, that's an interesting way to look at it. And I think the most important thing you said it tonight too, and that is we should learn to trust what people tell us their inner experience is. And as a psychologist, that's like the bottom line for us. When somebody comes into my office and tells me what their inner experience is, my job is to understand that and help them explore that. It's not to tell them you're wrong or God said it was wrong or or our culture doesn't like that. It's to help them explore that and make decisions about themselves. So that was the bottom line in your talk to me. For me, Arden, was respect people's inner experience. We cannot know what somebody else is going on inside their brain and their mind. And it's the highest form of humanism to let people be who they are and respect that in them. Anyway.
Thank you, Daryl. That means so much to me.
Well, you earned it. You earned it big time.